Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Not going to spend any time on an intro today. No waffle, no blathering, no nonsense. Just going to get straight into it because this is a post-Villa podcast. Just a bit of waffle, a bit of a chat about what went on last night at Villa Park and some of the wider issues that we saw last night and that we've seen throughout the season. With me to have a chat about all that, it's Andrew Allen. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. You give me the sexy jobs.
Yeah, that's it. We don't have an Arsecast Extra today because James is off with his other podcast, but that's fine. That's fine. And I'm not saying that you're just like second choice or, you know, third backup or anything like that. You're not the Matt Macy of the podcast. It's just the way these things go.
That's all right. You're my second podcast in 24 hours too. So.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, we're backing up each other here. That's fine. If you don't know already, Andrew does a podcast called Left Field, the Left Field Podcast. So do check that out. We, though, have got to talk about this game against Aston Villa, a game which Arsenal needed to win, Andrew, in order to keep any slim hope of finishing in the European places alive. That was extinguished last night by one single goal by Trezeguet. I looked up his first name, and he just goes by Trezeguet in general. I saw. Yeah. That's quite
cool.
It's an
ambitious father for you, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Don't worry about any of these trifling first names. Just call me Trezeguet. Let's talk about the team and the team selection and everything else that Mikel Arteta put out there last night. It was expected, of course, that he was going to rotate. There was a lot of effort and endeavour and physical hard work went into the Liverpool game, went into the Man City game as well. So it was inevitable that he was going to make some changes. The first thing that strikes me about the team selection that he put out last night is that Mikel Arteta really does not like Socrates.
Yeah, true. I don't know whether they've had a conversation at some point and the situation's been explained to him, but I mean, he's had not a look in at all, has he, since the restart?
Yeah.
Really interesting, but at the same time always makes the squad, so you get the feeling that he respects his professionalism.
I mean, we've talked on the podcast over the last number of weeks about Kolasinac and the sort of player that he is and the sort of player that he is in a system like this, and it just strikes me that, you know, if you're playing a back three against a team like Villa and you do need to be proactive and you need to have a lot of the ball and you need to be a bit more ambitious with the way that you play, you know, Socrates on the right-hand side of the back three and Rob Holding on the left-hand side of the back three where he's very comfortable and, you know, he is better on the ball than Kolasinac seems like a reasonable way to set your team up. But for some reason, he's just not interested in doing that. I don't know how you expect to play proper football with Kolasinac in your team.
It was a very frustrating watching Kolasinac because I saw lots of people remarking on it. He does do a lot of the kind of get the ball and more automatically kind of look for the sideways / backwards pass. But I looked at his stats today. He made 13 out of 16 passes in the final third last night and was second only behind Ceballos on that front.
Wow.
So weirdly, he actually did kind of try and partake in, you know, a push up the field. But I just don't understand if that was the responsibility you were going to give him, why you'd necessarily give it to Kolasinac of everybody in the team.
Most of those passes, I'm just looking at it here, most of those passes came in the second half when he was pushed wider at the start of the second half, and then of course when we went to a back four and used him as a central defender, you know, we had so much of the ball, we were camped in their half that he actually got forward quite well a few times. So yeah,
I mean, I could understand Kolasinac coming back into the team, given that, you know, Arteta's obviously played him there on the left side of that three-man defence quite a few times, and I guess in the second half he might have known that if we were chasing the game that you could kind of use him as an attacking outlet potentially. But it just didn't work. It was just very ponderous last night across the pitch. You know, I looked at the team and it felt very much like they sometimes get on the ball and they first have to process what it is they're supposed to be remembering the game plan is, and then they go and make the pass. And they don't necessarily always seem to be able to kind of do two things at once. So they make the pass and they stand still. And there was a lot of that last night. Not enough movement was a massive problem.
I mean, there were 6 changes, so there were fresh legs in there, but there is a difference, of course, between fresh legs and quality legs, and players who are capable of influencing games in positive ways. And I just sort of want to say here that, what we saw last night really wasn't a huge surprise. It's obviously disappointing and frustrating when we lose, but we've seen this throughout this season, and it just shows you, I think, that there are fundamental issues with the squad and the team and the players that we have to pick in certain areas. But, when you do bring in 6 fresh legs, or 12 fresh legs, I should say, you're looking for the team to be a bit more energetic, a bit more proactive. And I think what was obvious to me was that Dani Ceballos, who played, did he play the full game against Man City, or maybe he came off very late? He was the most energetic, the most driven Arsenal player on that pitch. And part of that, of course, was because he had a lot of responsibility in that midfield area to try and connect with the front players and to try and be creative. And we'll talk about creativity now, I'm sure. But it just felt very sluggish, very lethargic, as if the 11 players who were out there last night had done the whole game against City.
Yeah, I mean, he ran himself into the ground, and I think by the last 15 minutes you could see he was absolutely gone. That attempted challenge on Grealish just before Grealish set up. I can't remember which
Davis,
player
I
it was,
think.
the Villa player.
Was it?
Who went through on goal. Yeah, Keenan Davis. That was a kind of real, I'm knackered, I'm just going to try and take the player out kind of challenge. I can't really fault Ceballos. I think he did what we've expected of him and more last night.
Sure.
I think Torreira didn't have a great game, and I've noticed, obviously Arteta made the very quick decision at half-time to withdraw him. I think more than anything else because players were kind of getting past Torreira and he was being forced into desperate challenges. He'd already been booked, and Arteta's so wary of us going down to 10 men in games. I think that may have played a factor in Luiz going off as well, because he'd obviously got himself riled up with the linesman over something. So there were kind of changes there that he made. I'm not sure necessarily first and foremost for tactical reasons. I think it was sort of tactical, but also a fear of just going down to 10 men. I didn't really fancy Nketiah on the right.
I mean, do you think that selection, obviously it's not where he plays and it's not where he's best, but we didn't have Reece Nelson, who picked up a groin strain. I don't know how late that groin strain came, in terms of making plans for this particular game, but it didn't feel at all like a balanced front three, did it, with Nketiah, Lacazette and Aubameyang?
Really didn't. Eddie's kind of natural kind of inclination is to move inside, and where you might have wanted to help out Cedric a little bit more with 1-2s around the edge of the box, as soon as Cedric then put a ball in, you found him kind of putting the ball into a central defensive partnership who had no problem with dealing with just Lacazette. It just didn't quite seem to be the right balance. I thought Aubameyang looked really knackered. I don't want to accuse him of not trying, but there was a certain moment in the first half where a couple of challenges went in, and I think if that had been an FA Cup final, he might have really gone for it, but there was a certain amount of pulling out, perhaps with one eye on a final. They just didn't click. They didn't get going. There was no energy. There didn't seem to be any kind of real, any single player being particularly vocal on the pitch in the way that maybe we'd seen at the weekend. The fact that we had to go from a game where we'd been completely dominated and our task was very simple: just do not concede to, in this case, do not concede, and you need to go and, be, what's the word that Emery used to always use? Started with a P. Anyway, be proactive, basically. Yeah. We really struggled there. We really, really struggled last night. And look, we've all seen the kind of the pass maps and where that big empty blob is in the middle of the pitch, just in front of the opposition penalty area.
Yeah.
That's been a massive problem now for 2 seasons.
Yes, I mean, it is clearly an issue that Arteta is aware of as well. It's an issue, that he referenced after the game. I don't want to necessarily talk too much about a player who wasn't part of it or anything else, but the conversation happens every time something like this goes on. We have to have, or we we're reminded of the existence of Mesut Ozil by players, or by fans rather, who will sort of advocate for him to be that guy, to be that missing link, to be the creative hub of the team. And the stat going around, of course, is that, despite the fact he hasn't played since March, Mesut Ozil has created more chances in the Premier League than anyone else in this Arsenal team, which, of course, is remarkable. And you can look at it two ways, I suppose. One is that it might underline the importance of Mesut Ozil, if that's the way you want to look at it. The other is that it really, really, really hammers home the dearth of creativity anywhere else in the squad.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we became a bit Ozil reliant once upon a time, but at least at the time Ozil had loads of other players around him who could create chances, right? And now we've kind of moved away from Ozil being the central person and just not replaced him at all. I feel like if you're going to use Ozil, though, you kind of need to build everything around him. And I think maybe Arteta was tempted by that when he first came in. He obviously gave the German loads of opportunities to play football, and there were some half-decent performances there. But at some point, whether it was during the lockdown or just after the lockdown or whatever he decided that he's not going to play him. And I think maybe that's a sort of one eye on the future thing. What's the point in putting Ozil in now if I don't see him being part of this solution in the long term? It obviously is causing problems. I mean, you can't deny that not having his creativity to hand is not useful, especially even off the bench. It's frustrating.
What frustrates you most about it? For me, it's really the complete lack of clarity, as to what's going on. Is it like, is it his back problem? Is it a lack of motivation? Is it, something to do with not taking the pay cut? He was on the bench for the first few games after restart and then wasn't. So, the lack of pay cut, or the refusal to take the pay cut thing didn't have an impact on his inclusion in the squad in the first few games of restart. So something else has happened. And I think for me it's the fact that this remains this sort of low-hanging cloud over everything that we do. So nobody's talking about Mesut Ozil when we beat Wolves, or when we beat Norwich, or when we've beaten Liverpool, or when we've beaten Manchester City. There aren't these calls for him to be in. But of course, when we play the way we do last night against a team like Aston Villa, who are 18th, who are scrapping for their lives against relegation, but who are, with the greatest of respect to their fans, not a particularly great team. Arsenal had a lot of possession, but didn't do anything with it. The answer all of a sudden is Mesut Ozil. I think the answer is creativity, and it is addressing that lack of creativity in the squad. But it's hard to marry this a little bit with what Arteta said. Maybe before the City game, or when it was put to him, are you unhappy that you haven't got your team playing like Man City yet? And he was, well, look, I've only got the players that I've got. I have to be pragmatic. My job is to win football games. I have to use what I have to win those football games, and that informs his team selection and all that kind of stuff. But even though he recognises and knows fine well there is a complete lack of creativity in the squad, that his team is crying out for it, he knows Mesut Ozil as well as anybody else, given how long he played with him, he's still not using him. So that sort of tells you something about what's going on, and that then leads into the frustration that we as fans aren't aware of the big picture, or what is really happening here, because there's something going on.
There's definitely something going on, and I find it really hard to kind of believe that some of the pressure isn't coming from above Arteta, because Emery basically said as much, right? He was pretty much went public and said that he was told not to pick him. The club seemed to not want to have him on the books for whatever reason, and consequently we're constantly making excuses as to why he's not in the side. I think what's really frustrating is that there's no end in sight. I don't see Ozil really leaving this summer. If he really is doubling down on just sticking out his contract and he's fine with not really playing football, he's effectively, just existing at the club, and we've got another 12 months. I find it's a really sad situation, actually, because that contract was given to a player who was potentially at the peak of his career. World Cup winner, really creative, could have been the hub for another 3 years, and almost immediately there was a downturn in form, and almost immediately, with all of the shifting that went on upstairs in the different positions and Wenger's exit and all the rest of it, his stock fell. And we obviously decided we can't afford to have him, and at the same time we've never found a way to not have him. So it's a situation all of our own making. Perhaps some of the people responsible aren't in the club anymore, and it's an inherited mess, but it's still a mess, and it's so frustrating. And it shouldn't really, Arteta doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve to have to answer those questions every week, because ultimately he's not really responsible for that situation. If he's being, and I do feel like he's probably being told that there are, reasons not to pick him. I don't know what those reasons are. You don't know what those reasons are. It's weird. It's really weird. It
is weird. I mean, I feel like if Mikel Arteta really wanted to pick Mesut Ozil and thought that Mesut Ozil was a player he could use, he would. Like, I don't see that he would be dictated to by the executives on this one, because ultimately the first thing on which he is judged is results. And if he felt like he could get better results with Mesut Ozil in the team, he would pick him. So maybe there's something. Maybe he is hamstrung. Maybe he's got his hands tied behind his back. But, as fans, whether you're an Ozil fan or you're not an Ozil fan, it remains a very frustrating situation. And look, I don't think as a football club it's something that we can continue for another 12 months. Whatever happens at the end of this season, I feel like some kind of solution has got to be found, or some kind of explanation has to be made to give some insight into the situation, because it's kind of toxic, isn't it? I mean, maybe it's not toxic, maybe that's the wrong word, but it is. It's like a cloud. It's just hanging over us, and until such time as we move past it, there's intermittent sunshine, if you like.
I mean, I think as a supporter base, a large majority of the fans would quite happily just park it as a topic, but it is so often asked by the media of Arteta that it constantly returns to the top of the agenda. And here we are, you and I, talking about it now, because it's just there all the time. If Arsenal could somehow come out and explain why it was that they decided that they don't want to play Ozil, I think that would make life easier for everybody. But for whatever reason, they don't feel that they can do that, and as a consequence, we're stuck in this kind of cycle. I mean, look, Ozil, again, let's just be clear, Ozil was not the reason why Arsenal lost to Aston Villa last night. We have plenty of other issues. And Ozil was just one part of those number of issues. Yeah. I mean, I think fatigue massively played a part last night, for example.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a huge effort went into those games against Liverpool and City, and there's an element of after the Lord Mayor show to the way that we played in a way, but just sort of referencing the creativity element of things. And Arteta was asked about Ozil, and he said, look, we've played games without him. The answer isn't just a player, it's a collective of patterns that have to happen. And he talked about the lack of the final ball, etc., etc. But when he is discussing his plans for next season with Raul, with Edu, and whoever else is going to be involved in the transfer business, it strikes me that creativity in midfield in particular is a key area that Arsenal have to address. We all know that there are defensive issues and everything else. We can see those, and we do have, we did make a signing in January. We did bring in a centre-half in January who we haven't really seen a great deal of, so perhaps that's part of that rebuilding process. And we've got Saliba coming in, so that's another part of it. But creativity in wide areas and creativity in the centre of our midfield really feels to me like areas that have got to be addressed. And I wonder if part of what we might do is look at one or two players in that midfield who maybe we like, but who have to go. I'm thinking a little bit of Lucas Torreira here, somebody who doesn't feel 100% part of the plans or even 100% settled and happy with life in England and at Arsenal. I don't mean to say he's unhappy or anything like it, but I just wonder, given the noises his agent has made a few times, whether, if a move to Italy became available to him, he might decide that that's okay, and Arsenal might decide that's okay and use that money to invest in players who are different.
Yeah, I mean, I think if a deal is done for Ceballos, then Torreira might well question where he fits into that team on a regular basis, because it seems pretty certain that Arteta wants to keep Xhaka in the midfield as well. Yeah, I mean, if I was Torreira, I might be kind of wondering about that. I mean, a summer where you potentially sold or got rid of Guendouzi and Torreira to try and rebuild, I mean, that would have been almost unthinkable last summer, right? Despite some of the rumours going around with Torreira. Look, a creative midfielder is definitely high up the agenda, for sure. I mean, I haven't really seen us linked with anyone in particular.
Coutinho?
That said, I mean, yeah...
He's not really a creative midfielder per se, is he? I mean, he's not that... Yeah.
He takes a risk. I mean, what we definitely need is someone who's able to play within the system, but is able to bring their own level of kind of creativity and spark and individualism to the role. Someone who actually might, take a shot from the edge of the box, for example, which at the moment we seem kind of, deathly shy of.
Yeah.
You only have to look at Bruno Fernandes at Manchester United to kind of see how one single player can start to glue things together.
Yeah.
He's been a really fantastic signing for United, probably single-handedly helped drag them back up into the Champions League places in the space of 6 months. And that's the kind of impact we need someone to come in and make. And we've had that before with players. Arshavin came in and had a kind of instant impact, got us into the top four, obviously tailed off, but Santi was a fantastic signing. We used to collect these guys, Nasri, Rosicki, you even had the creativity of Wilshere and Fabregas. Even Song was creative in his own ways. I mean, we used to just have such a bank of these players, and now we just do not. And it's going to take a few windows to build that back up again, and it's also probably going to take a few misses as well. I think we might well find ourselves looking for diamonds and coming up with, pebbles sometimes. But we can't afford to make too many mistakes because the money's going to be so tight.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And look, when we think about creativity, we think about passing range and vision and the ability to rule a ball between defenders, and that's great. There are other ways to do it as well. I think ball carriers, players who are comfortable travelling with the ball, is another way of changing the momentum of a game and finding space between the lines. And Wilshere was one of those players, as you mentioned, who could sort of burst through the lines. Thomas Rosicki was a player like that. And I was looking at Jack Grealish last night.
I guess.
Yeah.
Like Mkhitaryan and Iwobi would carry the ball as well.
Yeah, exactly. But, those skills, but better, if you like.
Obviously,
And I was looking at Jack Grealish last night, and I was thinking, wow, put that guy in our team and it's immediately better. And it's not just because I love Jack Grealish's calves or anything like it. A player who is brave, who's quick, who's good on the ball, who can pass it, who can run, who can dribble, who's not afraid to take some chances. That sort of character, that sort of ability can really, really have a positive effect on a team's momentum.
Absolutely. And I think when we signed Pepe, we were kind of hoping that he would bring that level of speed and skill on the break. To become a transition side, we wanted someone who could carry the ball up the pitch, take on a player and make a match-winning difference. And I guess he's kind of struggled to do that. He's not as all action as Grealish. I mean, Grealish is he's got the build of almost a central midfielder, almost like a kind of Jordan Henderson, but with some of the skills of an intricate winger. And I think that's a really interesting combination. Probably Grealish I see in the similar mould to Zaha, a bit more rounded player, whereas Pepe seems very, very specific to that kind of role of playing on the right and cutting in onto his left foot. they're going to be expensive though. I mean, Villa are going to stay up now, so I'd be surprised if they want to let Grealish go. But there'd be a lot of clubs after him as well. I mean, there'd be plenty of teams, and a player playing in England, the premium. I think he would be out of reach for us now, which is a sad thing to state, really, because back in the day, I think he would have been very much the type of person who we could have got if we'd wanted. I don't have a kind of long list of creative players that I feel like we could be going, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one.
Yeah.
They're few and far between, and if they were, if they were easy to buy, people would, I think.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're going to have to be, I think, a bit inventive, a bit creative in the transfer market, and maybe some sort of knowledge of players, whether it's down the leagues or whether it's abroad or what have you. Somebody perhaps that's not on, the list of names that's going around in terms of who we might be after, but. So look.
There is an outside chance. Sorry, just quickly, that we could find those players internally. I think Smith Rowe's had a really interesting, development period at Huddersfield. I do think that Saka can play something similar to that role as well. I think, his physical development isn't done and dusted yet. He's still so young. I've almost forgotten that we have a Martinelli who is a game-changing player who can play with pace up front, albeit not in midfield. So there are sort of other players. I still feel like there's more to get. There's obviously more to get out of Reece Nelson. Although I wonder whether he's been a bit too slow to make an impact, and he could find himself one of the people we sacrifice potentially just because you could get money for him. But it may be that we have to look internally as much as we look kind of across the market.
Well, yeah, I mean, purely from a financial point of view as well.
Yeah.
There's no good case to be made, in my mind anyway, for spending, let's say, the money that you would have to pay to bring Coutinho on loan as a loan fee, and then the wages that you would have to spend on Coutinho, over the course of a season. How much are you paying out for one season of a guy? It just doesn't make any real sense. I think the internal solutions might be the key, or a cheap, unknown kind of signing might be the way that we have to do it. I like the idea of Smith Rowe. I have to say, I think he's impressed at Huddersfield, and I'll be very curious to see what the plans are for him, because when you send a player of his age out on loan, it's not sink or swim, but you're looking very closely at what he does and what he produces and how he plays. And it's not like I'm following a great deal of Huddersfield Twitter or anything like it, but from what I've seen and from the various retweets and stuff that gets put into your timeline, they love him and love the way that he's had an impact there since he joined in January.
Yeah, I mean, I think Danny Cowley, before he got sacked, the head coach, he came out with a kind of interesting line of, if I was a football fan, I'd be annoyed every time I take off Smith Rowe. He was a huge fan. He sees something in a player, and this is one of the kids who, he won the Under-17 World Cup with England. He was part of that fated golden generation coming through the ranks who were supposed to be kind of England's future. He's been part of something. I think he's got, you don't get to that level and not kind of have what it takes. So technically he's there. There were a few concerns, I think, when he first came into the Arsenal team about whether or not he might have the physicality to cope. But again, he's still growing, and I think he'll develop into a kind of Ramsey presence in terms of his physical build. He's probably a bit quicker than Ramsey, though. And there's something there, and I hope that Arteta gets to have a really close look at him in pre-season, and then we find a way to integrate him, because he also strikes me as someone like Willock who will get in the box, and we're just not getting people from midfield to run behind defences to add an extra layer and therefore an extra body in a dangerous position.
Yeah.
That really is something that we've struggled for as well.
What did you make of the substitutions that we made last night? Like you say, I think some of them were a bit enforced. Xhaka for Torreira at half-time, I understood. What were the other ones? There was...
Tierney came on, Willock came on.
Was it Tierney and Willock for... No, it was Tierney and...
Pepe came on as well.
Pepe came on, yeah, for Louise, which was a bit of... I get that as well, because he just did 90 minutes against City, 90 minutes against Liverpool, and he's 33 years of age, so there's an element of protecting him in there as well.
We had a remarkable number of attacking players on the pitch by the end, wasn't it? It was Aubameyang, Lacazette, Nketiah, Pepe, all on the pitch with Willock behind them.
Sort of playing as a right back, because he came on for Cedric.
Yeah, it was... Yeah, exactly. The thing is, it was kind of, let's just throw everyone on the pitch and see what happens. He knew that we were going to be left a bit more exposed at the back. We could have easily lost 2-0. But he was obviously hoping that something might happen in the box. We might grab something. But it didn't seem at that point that there was much of a plan other than just keep getting it wide, try and get a ball into the box. Obviously, Nketiah came close with the header on the corner. But, that was the closest, and we didn't actually have a single shot on target. Not a single shot on target against Villa away. That's just... that was what was really frustrating for me, is that you could kind of see every attack slowly building in the same way, and then Villa had no problems whatsoever clearing their lines. And actually, a bit like we did against City and Liverpool, you start to take heart from that. You start to realise, hang on, these guys don't actually have any other ideas. If we just keep doing this, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a team with a goal difference of minus 26 this season, so they were in the relegation zone for a good reason. There was nothing particularly challenging for the Villa defence last night. A lot of crosses, meat and drink really to Tyrone Mings and the rest of the defenders in there. We don't really have an aerial threat. Aubameyang has scored some headers. Eddie had his header from a corner, I think it was. But really, you're throwing crosses into players who aren't really competitive in the air. Like if you've got an Olivier Giroud in there, for example, then by all means bang in cross after cross after cross. But I guess as well it was a consequence of the way that Villa were playing. We just didn't have any other way of trying to get through them. Put it wide, put a cross in and see what happens, rather than there being anything particularly deliberate about that. Arteta afterwards seemed relatively sanguine about the defeat. Obviously not happy about it in any way. But as much as it's not a surprise to us, I can't imagine it's much of a surprise to him either.
I think he looked knackered as well, actually. I think the emotions of the last week or so had got to him, and I genuinely... he didn't seem as vocal on the sideline. I think he asked a hell of a lot of his players last week, and I think he always knew that the fatigue of playing every 3 days for this, for 2 months was going to catch up. And I think maybe he was also a bit realistic that with things not in our hands, that if we did lose tonight, then, at least we had the FA Cup final. It was very much, at least we've got the FA Cup final. Obviously, that's very risky. We were in a similar situation at the tail end of last season, weren't we, where it was all eggs into the Europa League basket and hoping to qualify for the Champions League up against Chelsea, and it all went tits up. So they hopefully have learnt their lessons from that, but who knows? Chelsea are a difficult team to second guess, I think.
Sometimes your eggs just end up in a basket, though. It's not like you're deliberately putting them there. I don't think it was, the fact that we lost to Aston Villa isn't really the reason why we didn't finish in the top six. There have been too many other bad results this season. I think Arteta had to try and change things around last night. Just that's the reality of playing the way we played in the last couple of games. There's a consequence to that, and he also needs to ensure that he keeps players fit and everything else. One of the questions that we got on the Arsecast Extra about after the City win and the Liverpool win was the danger perhaps of those on high seeing those kind of results and saying, well, maybe Arteta can do a lot more with these players, maybe he can get more out of them, squeeze blood from a stone, if you like. But he said something interesting afterwards. We'll talk about the Kroenke thing now in a moment, but he said there are going to be some ups and downs. Unfortunately, today is a down, but sometimes it's good to see the reality and then go again, move on, and improve, which I thought, yeah.
I mean, I don't think Arteta is going to get caught up in his own hype, that's for sure. He seems an intense realist, always demanding more. And I think it's not just around him, but around some of the players as well. I think the way that he kind of left Saka on the bench after he signed the new deal was interesting. You know, I just feel like there's always a desire to temper things when he realises that there are obviously this. You know, he's achieved nothing in the game. The squad achieved nothing really on the pitch. They need to grow together. They need to build into this. They'll get the plaudits when they really deserve it. But for the moment, it's they're more firefighting, aren't they? I like that attitude from Arteta, though. You know, I think it's really, really important to put your hands up and say, look, we're not good enough, and then, you know, to praise certain things but not all of the things when things go right. I mean, it's, you know, we live in a world where these things kind of are either black or white, and most of the time things are grey, and I think Arteta speaks in the grey for me. We'll see. I mean, I think he knows where the gaps are. He obviously knows. We can all see it. I mean, we've spent 40 minutes talking about them now. I just think his attitude next season, once he's had a transfer window behind him, is going to be tested, because obviously we don't know what we're going to do in the transfer window. He doesn't know whether he's going to get the backing that he needs financially. I say he gets the backing. I mean, whether the club can just afford it or not. So he might get more frustrated next season. I think his ideas are really, really good. I think he seems to speak as a coach very clearly, and everybody understands what he's trying to do. But ultimately, you can't, you know, you can't cook an amazing meal if you don't have amazing ingredients sometimes, right? Yeah,
100%. He was asked about the support from the club, and there was a plain banner flown overhead for the first 10 minutes of the game. It was one of the things that made me miss fans in the stadium, because the noise of the plane was really, really irritating without any crowd noise. But there you go. Anyway, the banner was back Arteta, Kroenke out. I think back Arteta would have been quite sufficient there, to be honest. You know, who is supposed to back Arteta but the Kroenkes in KSE? So anyway, it's a confused message. But he was asked about it afterwards. I think he picked it up slightly wrong on Sky, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it to say the banner was clumsily worded is an understatement. And then I think the Sky reporter kind of ended a conversation with, you know, are you getting the backing that you need or something? And he obviously very much took that in a completely different way to the way that the banner was maybe supposed to sort of mention, which was, I think the banner was basically saying, give Arteta the money that he needs to do his job, right? But Arteta was basically interpreting the banner and the line of questioning as, give him the support he needs on a day-to-day basis to do his job, which obviously he feels like he has. You know, he has a hierarchy of football executive committee and owners who actually are on the same page as him when it comes to the project that he's trying to undertake. He also full well knows, as most of us do, that there are so many unknowns because of the COVID-19 situation and because of the fact that we don't know whether we're in Europe, that he can't. How could he possibly be angry with the club for not having the solution to a problem which is affecting everybody? So in that respect, I can understand. He sounded a bit kind of exasperated, a bit irked by it all last night. He was very keen to point out that he does have the support of the Kroenkes. And I think he was slightly worried, wasn't he, about the comments, was it pre or post Liverpool, where it seemed to suggest that he was putting pressure on the board to give him the money to buy the players, and he was kind of backed away from that, so that's not what I'm talking about.
I mean, he was asked about that last night. I mean, I actually think that is kind of what he was doing. You know, he was making sure that nobody was under any illusions that this is a squad that needs to be improved. It's not necessarily give me £200 million, but it's like, this is the reality of our situation and this is how we're going to be able to fix it, or this is the way that we're going to fix it. You know, what did he say? There's no magic beans or there's no magic whatever it was, you know. And he was asked again last night about whether fans might have interpreted those comments as putting pressure on the club or suggesting that there was some kind of... I think more what he's worried about is the idea that there is a sort of a rift, if you like, or a lack of cohesion or a lack of people working together. I think that's probably more what his concern is, rather than the concept of him putting pressure on those on high, because I do think that's kind of what he's doing. And what he said was, I don't know if that's the impression. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to emphasize, and I'll do it again, that we need to improve in many areas. The first of all is my responsibility to improve the team and everything with the mentality. After that, we have certain areas that we need to get better. The top teams in certain areas are better than us, and we have to do that. So, you know, the messaging in terms of what his bottom line is, I don't think has shifted in any way. What he's doing is playing down the idea that there's disharmony at the club. The reality, of course, as he says later on, is, you know, the uncertainty is a reality. That's what he said about, you know, COVID-19, about finance, about money. We still don't know. You know, without the FA Cup final, we would now have clarity over what we can do in the summer, what we can and can't do, because we would not be in Europe. We've still got another 2 weeks or whatever it might be before the FA Cup final. You know, the plan will change depending on what happens in that particular game. Yep.
And I think, I think one of the other big things of uncertainty is obviously the Aubameyang thing, which again is money linked. There are obviously many areas for this side to improve. I get slightly worried about the idea that saying 8th is our reality, or something to that effect, because this Arsenal team were very close to coming 4th last year and spent money and improved, and have underperformed hugely, partly because we had a terrible coach in the first 6 months of the season. But I refuse to believe that we are a worse team than Sheffield United, that we're a worse team than this current Spurs outfit, that we're a worse team than Wolves. I think those teams have got some good ingredients there, and in a couple of cases decent coaches, not Mourinho. But you know, it's more the gap on the top teams. That obviously Arteta is concerned about. But I'm deeply frustrated that, you know, we've come out of lockdown in 9th, and we're probably going to finish the season in potentially 9th. That for me is frustrating. Even if we win the FA Cup, and it's been such a weird path along the way, you know, winning games we probably wouldn't have expected to win and losing ones that we did. It's just so weirdly inconsistent, very, very us at the moment. And it makes it quite frustrating as a supporter, because every time that you feel like you're going in the right direction, we kind of yank it and go in the other. And I know that Arteta says that it's good to be reminded of, you know, that things are not completely right. But God, it makes it emotionally draining as a supporter. You never quite feel like you can fully commit to anything. Even if it's just we score a goal, you think we're going to concede 5 minutes later. Or you win a game, you think straight away we'll lose the next one. I'm very tired of this season. Very, very tired.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to draw a line under it now on Sunday against Watford. I think I've, had my fill of this particular Premier League season, and obviously I'm hopeful and, really keeping my fingers crossed that we can do what we need to do in the FA Cup. And I completely see your point. I just feel like the circumstances of this season make it so difficult. I mean, I am frustrated by what's happened since lockdown, because there have been games, like you say, we should have done better in. I just feel like everything is a consequence of what came before, in a way. That every time we stumbled, and every time we seem to get back on our feet, we stumble again in some way or another. It's a consequence of squad building. It's the really surreal nature of this season makes it hard for me to get like super angry about it or anything else. I mean, I think I'm prepared to look at next season as a time when we can properly start, I don't mean to say judging or being critical or anything like that, but getting a better idea of what we're actually capable of and what this team and what these players are capable of. But, as Arteta said afterwards, he said the table doesn't lie. The table doesn't lie. And, maybe we're not maybe we should be a better team than Sheffield United or Wolves, but the table doesn't tell us that this season, So yeah, it really is down to what happens in this off season to sort of kickstart where we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for Arteta coming in January, the whole time he's been looking at the summer as the opportunity to kind of put his stamp on things, I guess. And it looks like he's going to be far more involved in a transfer recruitment process than Emery ever tried to be. Or even if he did try to be, tried to assert himself in. It feels to me that, Arteta's building a relationship with Edu, and they're trying to, it feels like they should be on the same page. The worrying thing is this Jarabchian super agent link stuff, which doesn't tally for me with what Arteta says. Like, I don't see, if we've got this scouting system across the world and we've got very specific needs to improve certain players in positions to play a very specific system that he wants to play, how we can then be sort of just buying guys off the bloke who happens to know the technical director and the football operations manager and stuff. That bit really grates with me at the moment, and I'm hoping that there's a way around that, and that we'll see something in the transfer market which isn't that.
Yeah.
But time will tell. Time will tell.
Time will tell. Okay. I mean, there is, Andrew, still the possibility of this season ending with success, with happiness, with a trophy, with European football. And amazingly, there is the scenario, isn't there, where we could deny Tottenham European football.
Yep. So if Spurs finish in 7th, which they look destined to do, in the FA Cup, we take that last Europa League spot, which obviously I want to happen so much, but I'm so scared to invest in that happening. Yeah. That the prospect of it not, it's just, if anything, it just sort of doubles up on the misery of us losing that day, because Spurs will have an extra thing to celebrate. And we're just teetering on the edge. It's too much for me to get excited about, because for all of the reasons I've mentioned, I'm very damaged by this season. It's just been, and it's not just this season, it's been a kind of a long 15 years. But yes, obviously that would be unbelievable, and beers will be drunk if we win. And I mean, it would be a massive shame that obviously the fans won't be there, and there'll be no kind of parade, because we missed out on a parade in 2017 as well. All of the stuff that makes you be a fan and sort of creates the memories that stick with you for the rest of your life just aren't going to be there. So it's so important we win, but it's going to be weird if we do, and it's going to be terrible if we don't. Yeah.
I think you'd nearly rather play a good team than a team, like Villa, for example, where your shortcomings are exposed.
For not being up for it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, look, FA Cup chat is something that we will do, I'm sure, next week in the build-up to the game and to the final. But we'll leave it there for today. Of course, not the most cheery and upbeat podcast, but there you go. That is the reality of our situation, and the situation that Mikel Arteta and those above him have got to fix when this season ends. But let's hope it does end with a trophy. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to Andrew. You can find him on Twitter at @ALlenSport, and you can subscribe to the Left Field podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Feels a bit like a problem shared is a problem halved kind of conversation in that one, but what can you do after a game against Aston Villa in which you lose? It's not going to be exactly the cheeriest podcast of all time, especially if it just reinforces stuff that you've seen all season which needs to be addressed. But hopefully that's something that Mikel Arteta and the executive team can do when this particular season ends and the transfer window opens, which it does on July 27th. So that's like Monday. So, you know, get busy, guys. Get busy, Raul. Get busy, Edu. Get your fucking checkbooks out, buddies. We will have another Arsecast for you on Friday, looking ahead to the final weekend of the Premier League season. And of course, James and I will be here on Monday with an Arsecast Extra. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Just to point out, there won't be an end bit in this particular podcast. Sometimes I just don't have it in me. Sometimes it just doesn't feel appropriate either. And this isn't really a real Arsecast, even though it is. It's sort of a bonus episode, which I hope you've enjoyed, despite the fact that it hasn't been the most upbeat one of all time. I'm going to leave it there for now. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And I will catch you on the next one. Until then, take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye.